in a democracy, how citizens trust, influence how they engage with these institutions as well. So let me say something briefly about Afrobarometer Network. It's a pan-African research network, and we do this survey to give a voice to citizens to contribute to policy making in Ghana. And Afrobarometer covers more than 33 countries, and CDD-Ghana happens to be the national partner for Afrobarometer. So there are 9 surveys. CDD led the data collection in Ghana. And CDD also happens to be the core partner to Afrobarometer, managing Francophone and African survey activities around the continent. On this note, I want to thank you very much for responding, to wish all the discussants and the lead speaker the best of day and the best of discussions as we zoom into the conversation. I want to congratulate on behalf of the center the team that led the data collection, Mavis, Dr. Salome, and all the AB team at CDD. I will at this juncture hand over to them to go ahead with the presentation whilst we sit back, listen, and contribute to the discussion. Thank you very much, and welcome to CDD once again.
Thank you very much. Giving voices to the people. That's a true definition and essence of this democracy that we are practicing. A government of the people, for the people, by the people. In practice, we don't really see that happening, but these interventions like the Afrobarometer survey bridges that gap in democratic practice. We're going to have the findings presented to us now. Dr. Edem Salome is the Director of Research, CDD-Ghana, will do the presentation for us. Please, let's put our hands together. Thank you. Let's do it better, please. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye. Good afternoon to everyone. Is it my microphone? Good afternoon to you all, and thank you once again for coming through for us to listen to what we found in our 9th round of the Afrobarometer survey. And, you know, Paul has spoken about Afrobarometer, so I will move swiftly to the methodology. And go back to the title. So you see that we've added democratic governance. So I'll speak about that as well as we go along. So let me just quickly go over the methodology. Although many of you might have heard what our methodology is, it's even more critical because these days we have a lot of surveys going on, asking similar questions that we ask in the Afrobarometer as well. And it's still useful that we re-emphasize what our methodology is. So we use a nationally representative sample of adults of 18 years and above. And I like to stress that it's 18 years and nothing lower than that, which doesn't make this a census. All respondents are randomly selected, which gives everyone equal chance of being in the survey. The sample is distributed across what we call our regions, elsewhere provinces, urban, rural areas as well. The proportion of the share, the sample is proportionate to the proportion of the population of each region. We use face-to-face interviews in the language of the respondent's choice, which means that we translate the questionnaire into various local languages that are officially recognized in the country. We use a standard questionnaire, which allows us to do comparisons across time. And as you will see, most of the findings we'll be showing today would show you the trend across time and over time. In this current survey, we used a sample size of 2,400, and we confidently say that it gives us a margin of error of plus or minus 2 percentage points with a 95% confidence level. The field work for this survey was conducted between April 4th and 20th of this year. So I'll move on quickly to the demographics of the survey, which, as I've always said, for us, mirrors what we largely see in our census data. But when it comes to the gender, you see a 50-50 split because we do what we call the gender alternation, where we go to ask the respondent questions. So which means that when the first interview is conducted with a man, the second is with a female. So that's why we have a split. In terms of residents, the urban area for this survey is 60% and rural is 40%. Education, it cuts across the various educational levels in the country. So for people with no formal education, our sample is 15%. For primary education, it's 25%. And as you can see, secondary education is the highest, which of course mirrors what we see in our country today. Post-secondary education is 19%. We do have the religious sectors also covered in the survey. So Christians are 78%, Muslims 16%, and then other religion is 6%. Now, our sample distribution, as I said, mirrors what we see in our census data. The middle column is what the population census data of 2021 gives us. And our sample, which is the extreme left column, is what we have per our 2,400 sample size. So as you can see, it's a direct reflection of what we have in our population. So I will now move on to the findings, and I will begin with the governance aspects of our society, although we said that largely the findings will border on corruption, trust, and institutions and party finance. And we have to give it a bit of context, because without knowing what our democratic aspirations are, none of these can really happen. So I will begin with what democratic aspirations are for Ghanaians. So I'll begin with what we call support for democracy and rejection of authoritarian alternatives. Now in Afrobarometer, this is what we call the demand side of democracy. So we see that a significant majority of Ghanaians, the 7 in 10, strongly reject all forms of authoritarian regimes and prefer democracy, which is 76%, which is the green bar there. We see there's a strong rejection of all other forms of governance by Ghanaians. Now, as I said in the beginning, we'll be looking at the trends of some of these results over time. And again, we look at the support for democratic norms and institutions over time. Here too, we see that there's a continued strong support for elections as a means of choosing our leaders, and this has been since 2017. We see that 8 in 10 Ghanaians say leaders should be chosen through only elections. There's also a continued and increasing preference for accountable governance since 2017. We also see that there's a significant majority, which is 2/3 of Ghanaians, say that it is more important for citizens to be able to hold government accountable, even if it makes decision-making slow. And then we also see that since 2014, 7 in 10 Ghanaians have consistently indicated their strong support for multi-party competition in Ghana's politics. And then between 2002 and 2022, which is 20 years actually, is it? The majority of Ghanaians have shown a strong support for presidents to be limited to the Constitution's 2-term limits in office. So I'll move on to support for party turnover. Again, here too, we see that the majority say it is better for power to sometimes change hands. So Ghanaians are in full support of party alternation. Here we see that 5 in 10, just a little bit above 5 in 10, strongly agree that political power should change hands once in a while. Let's look at demand for representation of elected officials. And then here too, we are seeing the same trend, which is that the majority of Ghanaians prefer their leaders to be elected, and that their leaders should listen to their views all the time. And then when it comes to whether Ghanaians see their government or their president as a boss or employee, again, we see that emphatic majority saying that a significant majority of Ghanaians believe that government is employed by the people and should respect citizens and what they demand. Similarly, we see that support for oversight of the president is also high. Again, we see that when it comes to oversight of the president, a solid majority of respondents strongly endorse the view that the president must obey the laws and courts and must be subjected to parliamentary oversight. Similarly, the MP should make laws for the country even if the president does not agree. Now, there's a place for opposition parties in a democracy. So, again, here too, we see that nearly 6 in 10 Ghanaians say the opposition parties should cooperate with government to help the country to develop. At the same time, we see that a quarter expects opposition parties to criticize and hold government accountable. And when it comes to support for media freedom, again, we see that although the support for media freedom declined in 2017, the support for the majority's right, of the media's right to publish without public control has continued to increase. We see that there's a 33 percentage point increase in support for media freedoms between 2017 and 2022. And the support for the media's role as watchdog has also continued to go up. We see there's a 9 percentage point increase between 2008 and 2022. Overall, the support for democracy and democratic norms and institutions continue to be high among Ghanaians. I think I'll skip that. All right, so now I'll move on to what we call the perceived supply of democratic governance. And this is measured by the level of satisfaction for democracy by citizens. Here, I would like us to focus on the trends. So here we see that the demand for democracy and the perceived supply of it in Ghana has fluctuated over the years. Satisfaction with the country's democracy is on a downward trajectory since 2017. We see that there's a 21 percentage point decline between 2017 and 2022, and a 9 percentage point decline between 2019 and 2022. In the views of Ghanaians, Ghana is not a full democracy or a democracy with minor problems. Similarly, we see that there is a 29 percentage point decrease between 2017 and 2022, and a 15 percentage point decrease between 2019 and 2022 regarding the fact that Ghana is a full democracy with minor problems, sorry. And we also see that there's a downward decline for satisfaction in terms of democracy, how democracy works in Ghana. So now let's look at what Ghanaians think about official impunity, unequal treatment, and self-censorship. Again, we see that there's a significant majority view when it comes to whether people should be careful of what they say. 7 in 10 Ghanaians believe that people have to be careful of what they say when it comes to politics, and that political party competition leads to violent conflicts sometimes, and that people are treated unequally under the law, and officials who commit crimes often go unpunished. So let's look at that over time as well. So we'll look at this from 2008 to 2022. Again, we see the same trend, that the percentage of Ghanaians who are saying that they are treated equally under the law and officials go unpunished when they commit crimes has increased between 2019 and 2022. We find this, we see the same trend when it comes to MPs and assemblymen, whether they listen to constituents or not. And then we see that here too, Ghanaians are saying that MPs who are their direct representatives never listen to them or only listen to them sometimes. And they say the same about their assemblymen as well. Now let's look at level of media freedom. Here we see that 1810 Ghanaians are saying that the news media is free to report, should be free to report and comment on news without censorship. Now let's look at the demand for democracy versus the supply of it. You know, in the beginning I said that all of the questions that assess what type of regime people want, and then all of the issues that test the satisfaction with democracy is what we call the supply side. The demand side is a type of regime. So we want to look at that over time, and now we are looking at it from 1999 because this question is a core question for Afrobarometer. It's been asked since Afrobarometer started in 1999. So here too we see that while the support and the perceived supply of democracy have varied over the years, there's been a downward spiral in terms of the satisfaction and the supply of democracy since 2017. So while there's a high demand for democracy, there's a decline in the supply of it in terms of how people are satisfied with how democracy is run in the country. So just to sum up before I move to the next slides, we see that the demand for democracy and the perceived supply of it in Ghana has fluctuated over the years, and satisfaction with the country's democracy has been on a downward trajectory since 2017, like I said. The assessment of Ghana as a full democracy or a democracy with minor problems has declined by 21 percentage points since 2017. And large majorities say that people have to be careful about what they say about politics, and that political party competition leads to conflict, and that people are treated unequally under the law, and public officials go unpunished when they commit crimes. All right, so I'll now move on to our assessment of performance, of the performance of elected leaders. So let's look at the ratings of leaders' performance. And now we are looking at those who are directly elected. Here too, we see that the majority of Ghanaians, about 6 and 7 in 10, rate the president, the MP, and the assembly members negatively. 7 in 10 strongly disapprove of the performance of the president. We see a similar pattern disapproving or strongly disapproving the performance of MPs. And then 6 in 10 disapprove or strongly disapprove the performance of assemblymen and women. But it looks like the assemblymen and the local governance is doing a lot better than the national level. Let's look at the trends too. And now we are focusing on evaluation of the president's performance. So we're looking at this from 2002 to 2022. We see that the positive ratings for the president's performance has declined by 31 percentage points between 2019 and 2022. And now when I mention 2019, I'm referring to the last round of the Afrobarometer survey. We also see that the negative ratings has also increased by 34 percentage points. So we haven't seen any improvement either way. So just to wrap up again, the majority of Ghanaians rate the performance of the president and their MPs and assembly members fairly badly or very bad. We also see that the positive ratings of the president's performance has declined by 31 percentage points between 2019 and 2022, from 61% to 30%. Now, one of the questions that we asked in this particular round of survey was about, expectations of our current parliament, which we've described as a hung parliament. Now, before this current round of Afrobarometer survey, we conducted what we call the post-election survey, in which we asked Ghanaians to tell us what the expectations were for the current parliament. And so in that, this slide is not from this survey, it's from the post-election survey. And in that survey, Ghanaians mainly expected the current composition of parliament to impact some parliamentary practices and functions and government's business programs. So for instance, the majority, as you can see, were of the view that the hung parliament would keep parliament in check, and that the hung parliament will improve the practice of parliamentary democracy and enhance democratic development. They also expected that the current parliament would ensure full attendance of all MPs' sittings. And at that time, only 30% thought the current parliament wouldn't make any difference. So in this round, we wanted to see how effective the current parliament is, this what we asked in the previous, in the post-election survey. And then we find that based on the expectations from 2021, we see that Ghanaians think that the current hung parliament has only been marginally effective in ensuring good governance. We also see that only a little, about half, 46%, say the current composition of parliament has made MPs somewhat or much more effective in scrutinizing government spending. We also see that an almost split in opinion when it comes to the current parliament's effectiveness in passing laws. We also see the same split when it comes to cooperation and consensus building amongst MPs from either side of the House. Okay, so I will move on to corruption. And, when Alfred was speaking, introducing the topics for this presentation, he was hoping that we'll see a different league table in terms of who is most corrupt in Ghana. I can't say. Oh, it's already up. All right. Alfred, your wish, unfortunately. So we see that amongst the most, in the minds of Ghanaians, the most corrupt public officials are led by the police, followed by the office of the president, and then MPs, judges and magistrates, tax collectors, and NGOs thankfully are perceived as the least corrupt. So we want to look at that over time as well. So we are now focusing on the top 5, but this is the first 3, the top 3 first. So again, we see that over time amongst the police, the perception of corruption amongst the police has increased by 8 percentage points since 2019, which is since the last time we conducted the Afrobarometer survey. And at the same time, the perceived corruption among judges, magistrates, and tax officials has increased by 6 and 11 percentage points, respectively, since 2019. So now let's look at perceived corruption at the presidency and among MPs. Like I said, we are looking at just the top 5 in the league table. So again, the perceived corruption of the president and among MPs has also increased compared to 2019. All right, so we asked a few questions about the pandemic, and one of the questions we asked related to whether there was corruption with regards to funds allocated for the pandemic. And again, we see that there's a wide perception that the COVID funds made available to government for combating the pandemic or responding to it were lost or stolen due to corruption. And we see that 7 in 10 Ghanaians believe that funds were lost due to corruption. So we look at the overall picture of corruption in Ghana since 2014. Again, we see that more than half, which is 77% of Ghanaians, say that the overall level of corruption in the country has increased somewhat or a lot. And this is a 24 percentage point increase from 53% in 2019 to 77% in 2022. At the same time, the perception of corruption has decreased. The perception that corruption has decreased has also declined by 10 percentage points. So either way, it's still not looking good. Ghanaians still think that there's a risk for reporting corruption. And again, we see that a third of Ghanaians say that they cannot report corruption without fear of retaliation. And this is a decline of 4 percentage points since 2019. So we now look at the evaluation of how government has dealt with fighting corruption over time. And again, this is a 10-year period, 2012 to 2022. Again, we see that there is an increasing negative rating of government's fight against corruption. The negative ratings of government has increased since 2017 by 55%. Okay, so I think I will move on to trust in institutions. All right, so now let's look at trust in institutions. We see that the Ghana Armed Forces, religious leaders and traditional leaders and courts are the most trusted among the public institutions in Ghana. There's something that is exciting everybody. Oh, it's who is ranking at the bottom of the table, right? Okay. The least trusted is the New Patriotic Party. I think you wanted me to say it. All right. So let's look at the trends over time. Again, from 2012 to 2022. I mean, the pattern is not very different. We've seen a lot of declines, throughout our findings, and this is no exception. Again, we see that we see a decline in trust in institutions between 2019 and 2022, notably trust in the president. And we also see a decline over the 10-year period as well. That's the extreme, the column to your extreme right. So we are looking at between the last round of Afrobarometer and then the 10-year period. So we've seen declines consistently throughout. All right, so to wrap up this session again, we see that amongst public institutions, the Ghana Armed Forces, religious leaders, traditional leaders, and the courts are the most trusted. Trust in institutions has declined between 2019 and 2022, and notably, trust in the president has declined by 25 percentage points. So I'm going to round up the presentation with our findings on views on political party financing. So, one of the issues that's been debated over time is whether the state should fund, political parties and political party campaigns. So in this particular round, we asked our respondents to tell us their views on state funding of political parties. And we see that as a significant majority of Ghanaians do not think that the state should directly support political parties during campaigns, election campaigns. We see that 2 in 10 Ghanaians disagree, and 1 in 2 strongly disagree that the state should provide any form of direct support to political parties during election campaigns. And again, close to 7 in 10 Ghanaians disagree or strongly disagree that the government should provide direct support to political parties during election campaigns. So, if parties should be funded, what's the best approach then? Here too, we see that only a few agree or strongly agree that the state should support political parties. And between 2 in 4 and 10, from 2 to 4 in 10 say the government should provide direct financial support to every eligible political party, which is 36%. I think I confused people with the 2 to 4. It's 36% who is saying that. And we see that an equal number also say that, there should be free advertisement on state media for every eligible party. Now, this finding is computed for those who say, there should be some kind of support for political parties. We also see that about 25% say that resources such as vehicles, office equipment must be provided to every eligible political party. So, are Ghanaians willing to pay additional taxes to support political parties? Here too, we see that there's quite an emphatic no to that. Ghanaians will not pay an additional peswa when it comes to funding political parties. Only, let's say 18% say that, there should be some sort of taxation to fund political parties. So just to round up again and highlight some of the key findings before I sit down, we see that we see that while the demand for democracy and perceived supply of democracy in Ghana have fluctuated over the years, satisfaction with the country's democracy has been on a downward trajectory since 2017. And again, when it comes to political party financing, a large majority of Ghanaians think that there should be no state support for political parties during election campaigns. And when it comes to corruption, the perception of corruption among public officials and institutions have increased compared to 2019. And when it comes to trust in institutions, the trust in institutions has declined between 2019 and 2022, and notably, trust in the president has declined by 25 percentage points. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Please, let's put our hands together once again. Please. Thank you. Thank you, Doc, for this. And unfortunately, my wishes did not come true. I was hoping the Ghana Police Service would not be number one. But as we can see, the other day I was having a conversation with COP Kofi Boachi. He says that we should factor in the quantum of the corruption as well, because for the police they take 1 Ghana, 2 Ghana, and another person, a politician or the other, would engage in some act of corruption that would cost the state over 20 billion or billions of Ghana cedis. So how does the factor of the quantum of the monies that we lose to corruption also come into this particular conversation? So that's one of the things we're going to be talking about. And then also culture. He cited some, and I like the fact that we have, with all protocol observed, a traditional leader as well in our midst. Says some of our cultural practices and our sayings also give room to corruption. That if your brother is somewhere, why should you go hungry? And all those things. We'll get into the conversation this afternoon. But I think that with some of the details we've seen, it doesn't surprise many. It's consistent with conversations that we've been having over the last few days gone by. And we're going to zoom into the plenary, and then also would have the questions and answer session. Dr. John Osei Kwapong is a D&D fellow in the field of politics of development at the CDD, well known in Ghanaian civic and social media communities for his interest in research methods and database policy analysis. Dr. Osei Kwapong holds a PhD in political science from George Mason University, Virginia, USA, a master's degree in public administration with a concentration in public policy from Clark Atlanta University, and a Bachelor of Arts degree in political science from Hilton College. He joins us on Zoom. Doc, thank you for connecting with us. Great. Mrs. Linda Ofori. Hello, Doc. Can you hear me? Hello, Doc. If you can unmute. I think it's unmuted. Hello, Doc. Can you hear me? Hello, Doc. Can you hear me?
Yes, I'm here.
Great. Thank you very much. Good afternoon. Thank you for connecting with us. Mrs. Linda Ofori is Executive Director of the Ghana Integrity Initiative and the local chapter of Transparency International, has a responsibility for the implementation of the organization's strategic plan and the overall oversight responsibility for effective and efficient management of the GI Secretariat. Her multi-annual professional experience includes work as the Programs Manager of GI Forum for Africa Women Educationists and the Ghana Life Insurance Company. Prior to GIM, Mrs. Ofori led the Ghana Anti-Corruption Coalition, GACC, as Executive Secretary. Please, let's put our hands together for Madam. Thank you. As she takes her seat, please, let's put our hands together. Thank you very much. So, we zoom into the conversation now. And I'm sure that as the slides were scrolling, we would have taken some screenshots and notes to guide us all when we get to the Q&A session. But let me start off with you, Dr. Kwapong. So we see the demand by citizens, for instance, for democracy to work going up by some 65%. But as to whether it is meeting the expectations and needs and demands of the people has actually declined over the period. So, look, citizens will surrender our sovereignty in an election. And I always say that politicians don't come into power to rule the nation with their own money. We fund their manifesto promises and their plans in a hope that is going to improve our standard of living and reduce our cost of living. At what point does leadership say that this is what I believe is right for you as against what the people believe is right for them? We've seen instances where citizens have raised concerns about policies of government. E-levy comes to mind, but government goes ahead with what he believes is right. At what point do we have to employ the balance between what citizens expect and what leadership thinks is right?
Thank you very much for that. So again, if you look at the information that has been shared, notice that there is something that I've always been saying whenever I observe Afrobarometer data, which is Ghanaians have generally made their peace with democracy. So the levels of support for democracy still remains very high. Our appreciation of democratic norms still remains very high. But at the same time, you also do see quite a number of challenges to that peace that we've made with democracy. So, for example, there's this sense of from what was shared, you're seeing that the extent to which citizens find government very responsive, whether it's their MPs or the assemblymen or women, is not that very high. If you also see the level of satisfaction with democracy, then the way it's working, you see quite a sharp decline. At the same time, citizens strongly believe that government is like an employee to them, but also government has to take into consideration their views and be a lot more representative of what it is that they seek and demand. And for me, signals that our leaders should pay very close attention to, right? Because I keep saying, how long would we hold that peace we've made with democracy? Now, when I look at the trends, I am reassured that we would continue to hold that peace with democracy for as long as we can. But we cannot ignore the challenges to that peace that we've made with democracy. And for me, that is where leadership becomes very critical. The last thing you want is to citizens to begin to perceive that their governments, especially their representatives like MPs, don't listen often. You don't want a growing gap between how much they want democracy and how much they say they are satisfied with the way democracy is working. And for me, these are some of the critical signals in response to your first question, that leaders have to begin to find a way of saying, how do we ensure that we are meeting the people at their pinch points so they can begin to feel a little differently about how our democracy is currently working?
So in what form should this engagement or trying to understand and take into consideration the views and the concerns of the people come? Because we see from the survey that the problems or deficiencies in our democracy, according to the respondents, increased to 66%, up from 61% in 2019. So the security of our democracy, if what the Constitution says is anything to go by, is hinged on its ability to meet the basic needs of the people. And consistently we are seeing this perception that, look, this democracy is failing us. In what form should that engagement come?
I think, for example, platforms like this, I think the key stakeholders, bringing them together around the table to look at these very strong signals that are coming through Afrobarometer. If you go back and you look at 9 rounds of Afrobarometer, for example, you do see very clear signals of the things that Ghanaians keep saying are their policy priorities: unemployment, management of the economy, education, issues of poverty, for example, right? Now, I struggle to understand why leaders, after so many rounds of Afrobarometer, would not give it the kind of attention that it should be giving, because rounds after rounds, the message keeps getting reinforced. The things that we believe are important to us. For example, I mean, Parliament should be really flocking to CDD, to be getting copies of this, to really understand what sort of signals that citizens are sending to them. Because it's the only way you can begin to find a way to turn this trajectory around. Because like I keep saying, as for the peace with democracy, we've made with it, but we still wanted to deliver. And it's becoming clearer and clearer that it is not delivering the kinds of dividends that citizens wanted to deliver. And I don't know how much more clearly and loudly citizens will have to speak through instruments like the Afrobarometer survey before our leaders become a lot more responsive.
It's interesting that you talk about the responses that we normally give to this. So you will have questions about methodology coming that is, and the fact that we're dwelling on perception, but nobody forms perceptions in oblivion or in a vacuum. It's either the person has had experiences or has heard of someone else's experiences, and based on that, they'll give answers to certain questions that they are asked. So let's look at Parliament. The survey talks about the respondents saying that members of Parliament and assemblymen, and indeed the presidency, continues to ignore the views and concerns of the people. I zoom into Parliament because the Constitution provides some level of grounds for Parliament to go or parliamentarians to go and engage their constituents on specific laws that comes before them. But consistently we've seen parliamentarians fail at doing this, and they only go to the people when they need their mandate. How worrying is this if this continues going forward?
Very worrying, because they are the people's representatives. And I would even want to take you back to a survey that was done by Professor Uzo-Mensah, I think it was in 2018 or 2019, that looked at Parliament. And anyone who paid close attention to that survey would not have been surprised to see how the parliamentary primaries turned out in 2020, and ultimately how the parliamentary elections turned out in 2020. Because in that survey, you do see quite a lot of dissatisfaction in terms of the presence of MPs in constituencies, how citizens were feeling about their particular MPs. Quite a high number were even indicating that they were not, if the election were held that day, they were not going to vote to retain their MP. You juxtapose that against the percentage of respondents over the last couple of rounds of Afrobarometer, where they've asked, how often do you think your MPs listen? And if you look at even just the line of the percentage who say their MPs never listen, I think it becomes a very worrying trend, again, that for a citizenry that have consistently shown its strong preference for democracy as a form of government, that to find that a key or a core component of it, which is the representative side of the democracy equation, is perceived as not being very responsive, doesn't listen very often, I think becomes also a very worrying trend. And again, I like the fact that Afrobarometer keeps reinforcing some of the things that we are having conversations about in public spaces, and even some of the things that other surveys also have found. So it's not just one instrument saying, look, this is how citizens are feeling based on their lived experiences. But you can triangulate other sources to say there are some very serious warning signals that we can't afford the luxury of overlooking.
I'll bring it in at this point, madam. So generally, the responses to this survey we've seen over the period, and that's what Doc was talking about, if paying attention to the detail would or should have informed certain decisions that we've taken over the period. I find out your thoughts about the findings itself before we move into the corruption aspect, which obviously is your place of passion.
Thank you very much, and thank you to CDD for inviting me, Afrobarometer for inviting me. For me, when I looked at the findings and listening to the presentation, I looked at it not too long before we came here, and also listening to the presentation being made. I am not surprised, because this picture is worrying and is getting gloomy, and reason being that we are deteriorating. At some point we say stagnation, but now we've moved beyond stagnation. And and that is where we should sit up. It's a wake-up call to all of us, and to governments and the people that have the power to do what some of us cannot do. Can you imagine if CDD was the government and Linda was the Chief Justice, Attorney General? Can you imagine what we would do?
President.
Can you imagine the things we can do? But we will not be voted for. So we have to stay here and try to hold government to account. But the picture is very worrying. For me, when I was coming, I was so sad. So I wanted to wear a very black dress this afternoon.
To mourn the state of affairs.
The state of affairs. And we cannot run away from the fact that the picture is actually the contribution of where we find ourselves economically as well. And corruption has been, we'll go to corruption, but let me say this, has been one of the biggest challenges we have. It's like having resources, mismanaging it, and later saying something has been the cause of the problem. So from the whole report, the democracy bit that Doc just spoke about, to the corruption bit, I think it creates a very worrying picture, and we should do something about it. We are sitting on the time bomb. I don't want to be a doomsayer, but
that's the reality of the situation. That's the reality
of the situation we find ourselves in.
But you see, everything rises and falls on leadership, isn't it? And that's another aspect of the survey that worries me, and I'm sure lots of people, that leadership that is supposed to lead in the fight against all of these instances and improve on the governance structures and systems so that the offerings of this democracy would at least meet the basic needs of the people is also captured in here, and the people are losing trust in leadership. What do you have to say about this?
It's the biggest challenge that we are facing now. And for me, it's political leadership. It's not helping matters. Institutional leadership, the accountability institutions, leadership are also not showing commitment. In as much as, if you look at the findings that we have and the institutions that are actually occupying the top positions. So we have
the Ghana Armed Forces, religious leaders, traditional leaders.
Which of them are you mentioning?
Let's mention the ones. The trust. Yes.
Okay, so
and the one
about the most corrupt institutions, or the ones you see. You have the police administration, we have the executive,
yes.
the presidency.
That's right.
We have the legislature.
That's right.
We have the judiciary.
Yes.
We have the tax institutions.
Yes, tax institutions.
And it's very worrying. The very institutions with the mandate to help fight the canker are the ones topping the list when it comes to fighting corruption. It's only when you get to the place where we talk about the trust we have in the institution that we see the courts being mentioned.
That's right.
Again. That's a bit reassuring. But from the beginning, the institutions, the very pillars of our democracy, they're the ones that are found or perceived to be very corrupt. And the ones that do not wield the powers that they have are the ones that we haven't trust in. So traditional leaders, religious leaders, what powers do they have? They can actually, people believe in them. People believe in them, vote according to the patterns of their how they vote during elections.
That's right.
So they influence the people. But when it comes to the power to run the state and manage the country, they don't have those powers. They don't have those powers. So the one with the powers to do all that are the ones perceived to be very corrupt. And now we are moving beyond perception. Because I think about 6 days ago, last week somewhere, the Statistical Service and Straj also issued another report. They call it actual. They call it perception.
True.
CPI is perception.
I tell you.
So CPI is perception, Afrobarometer is perception, and this one is actual. And they are all pointing towards the same direction. Also telling us that the relationship between perception and the reality are not so different, because the people actually talk about their experiences.
Absolutely.
So then this argument about this being perception and all that. When we launched the CPI 2019, 2020-21, so government said we are stagnating. Now the findings are pointing to the fact that we are not stagnating. Now it's getting worse. That's why I said from the beginning that we have to do something. It's actually something about it, and the situation is not anything to write home about.
Let me also acknowledge NCC Thank you very much. So, Dr. Kwabong, I'll come back to you on this point of leadership that Madam Linda just landed on. Because if these institutional leadership is supposed to lead the process of improving on the systems and structures to address, for instance, leakages that cost all of us. I mean, when the conversations about the E-levy was going on, we raised concerns about leakages in the system, that we are all losing money as a result. And then also you have political leadership that, according to this survey, is failing the people. What should institutional political leadership be doing in the face or as a result of this survey details that we have now? Hello, Doc. Yes, you can. Great.
All right. Thank you very much. So, you see, it is the actions or inactions of institutions and the leadership in these institutions that either reinforces trust in them or trust declines in them. So, for example, if you look at the level of trust, let's say in the courts of law, a critical institution designed to help make democracy work. As an impartial arbiter, sometimes in conflicts between citizens or even between, the executive and the legislature. You have to say to yourself, what are some of the signals that sometimes you see from the courts that would make people have faith and trust in them, right? If you're perceiving courts to be corrupt based on either stories, lived experiences, then it is up to the leadership in that institution to begin to look internally at procedures, practices. How do they interact with the public in ways that reinforces that trust or dwindles that trust in them, right? Because why would I want to go to court if my first perception of the court is that it is corrupt and I can't trust them? Or why would I want to bring a petition before my member of parliament if I don't trust them or if I perceive a certain level of corruption within that institution? So again, it goes back to the actions and inactions of the leadership in these institutions and what they need to do to reinforce the kinds of trust that citizens need to have in them.
So we can actually connect this trust in institutions. Reason why people don't have confidence in these institutions and rather would have confidence in institutions that do not formulate laws is because of the unfortunate or negative experiences that they have had with these institutions or people they know have had with these institutions. So for instance, the courts, law enforcement agencies, leadership. Linda, what should these institutions, for instance, because we know the problem in terms of corruption, I keep saying that we've been talking about this for only God knows how long. People are even getting tired when we start talking about corruption. It's like people are beginning to agree with the former president that is as old as Adam. So what should be done differently than what we are doing now? Is it about institutional reforms? Are we supposed to introduce new institutions? We've seen the Office of Special Prosecutor in there. How much of a layer of effectiveness has that office added to the fight against corruption in this country? Linda.
Thank you very much. When it comes to passing new legislation and then establishing new institution, I think I always say we have enough for now. And so we should see how effectively these institutions can contribute to the fight against corruption and even helping in the advancement of our democracy. So we have to, the current ones that we have are good enough to work with for now. They have their own challenges as well. But you mentioned what they should be doing. You see, the courts, judiciary, the police, and all those things, they have their own codes of conduct, and STRAJ at some point is even supposed to help them to formulate same and then work effectively with them. So the structures are there. it's just a matter of a bit of low commitments, unwillingness, and sometimes it's like the citizenry lose confidence and trust in them because they see corruption happening. We are not able to prevent, and we are not also able to sanction. So the problem is that we know what to do. It's just a problem of the leadership not willing to act. And for me to solve the problem, it should be the citizens being more interested and committed to holding them to account. So we just cannot just sit unconcerned. We just cannot just be praising when we are not supposed to be praising them. But we have to really hold them to account. And we have to find new ways and means of doing that. Maybe the old strategies are not working. Maybe having press conferences and meetings like this and launching results are not working. But then what can we do? We should actually be doing more of naming and shaming, more of demanding them to deliver on their mandates. We have done a study before where we went to accountability institutions to find out what they've been doing over a period of time with particular legislation that they have. Let me give you an example. We had the former Auditor General and some leading CSOs helping us to get the disallowance and surcharges rules working for us. He leaves office, and to date, with all the findings that we have in the Auditor General's report, nothing seems to be happening on that level. What can we do? We have to call him to work. And so not too long ago, I saw letters being written to him and demanding that he act on that particular one. To be frank, why should we call on them even before they do that? Why do you accept a position when you are not ready and willing to act? And if they are ready and willing to act, what is not making them act? We should be investigating into some of these matters. In the past, people have resigned because they said the executive is not allowing me to work. Now others have come on board. Others are there doing basically nothing. That's why I said it is not only political leadership, even though for me, they are the number one. They have shown less commitment. They've not really done what we wanted Yi Levy to pass.
Not all of us.
No, they wanted. So then they wanted.
Okay.
Within a short period of time, we had it.
Indeed.
Corruption can really be dealt with if they show the commitment that's needed.
Commitment.
The same commitment. We should be able to. If sanctioning and investigating takes a longer period to do, let us work with the prevention. So an institution like the Internal Audit Agency is still there, not even having a very good office to work in, not having a legislation properly so-called to, and that they are suffering. But that's one of the avenues we can use to prevent corruption from happening. We just don't want to equip them.
Well, the case that maybe the lack of commitment to do so is as a result of the benefits that the people who are supposed to lead the process in improving on these institutions to fight corruption are actually benefiting from the weaknesses in the system. So obviously you wouldn't expect that they would lead that process in improving on the systems and structures to fight corruption. How worrying is that? I mean, to the extent that if the people who are charged with that responsibility to improve these systems you're talking about, the Office of Special Prosecutor struggled with, and I'm sure you served on that board. We have Samir Darko here. This is public knowledge. These problems with lack of resources, adequate resources to work. So we set up an office. Now they have to come out in the media. We've seen this published over time. So if the people who are supposed to empower these institutions to fight corruption, and as we saw in the survey, are perceived to be corrupt, meaning that they are benefiting from the weaknesses of the system, how can we trust them to lead that process of improving these systems and structures?
So I didn't say they should be doing it. We should be holding them to account. You know, when it comes to the political leadership, we will be able to use election to change them. Now we're actually using election to recycle corruption. That's what I say. I don't see.
We're using election to recycle corruption.
Yes, we change from one corrupt government to another corrupt government. It's been happening. Oh yes, I'm not somewhere so I can say it without, and I'm sure I can drive home safely. That's what we've been doing. And you see the list. You saw the Electoral Commission's name also came up there, and we have been using that approach. We are not getting anywhere with it. Citizens, we should find new ways of working. the civil society organizations are trusted some way, somehow. We are accountable to our donors.
Indeed.
Only a few are not, but then we are accountable to our donors. And so we are trusted. And so we should be finding new ways of working, of bringing people together, mobilizing them. Positive energy. So I'm not talking about the things that happened not too long ago. I'm not supporting those ones. No. I'm talking about how can we democratically mobilize people's support to push this anti-corruption agenda, to hold our leaders to account, and also demand from them, take their mandate. They have laws. They are supposed to be doing something. Auditor General has public procurements. They have the legislation. Let us go to him and demand from him to be more accountable than they are being. Because we cannot just sit down. In the past, it was sole sourcing. Now it is sole sourcing. Now we are going back to IMF. Another government to counter us. Why? At some point, I don't want to say nonsense, but it has to stop.
Oh, you are permitted to say it in an environment like this.
Pardon me. So I think it's about reorganization, being led by civil society organizations to demand accountability from our leaders. And also when it gets to the election part, now voting people of integrity into office. We know them. They've been corrupt. They come again to ask for our mandate, and we still vote for them on whatever lines, I don't know. We should stop that and vote the persons of integrity to occupy political leadership. But for institutional leadership, we should also be calling on the president to sack some people. People in this country, no one gets sanctioned. People steal. Their names are recorded. We see the Auditor General's reports. That's even I'm sure a small fraction. That's what is recorded in there. And then they still stay in power. It's only in this beautiful country that people can abandon their position, go rest in the weather, cool weather, and still we pay them resources and we cannot sack them. Nobody gets sacked. The Corruption Perception Index from 2016 till now, we have been hovering and dancing around 40, 41, 43, 42, 40, 41, and that is what it's over 100. Ghana's performance has been like that for now. Now, Afrobarometer is telling us that we are not only just stagnating, we are going down. It's a wake-up call on all of us. I think we have to do something. The media has a role to play, but still, I think civil society now will have to take the bull by the horn, and then we have to do more than we are doing to just hold them to account. I'm not waiting for elections, please.
Not at all. Just hold them to account. And please, let's put our hands together for our guests, speakers. Dr. Kwapong, on the back of this, because Madam Linda talked about leadership and voting people of integrity into office, I wonder if there's actually a criteria to identify the people of integrity to actually vote them into office. Because in every election, I keep saying that we are confronted with two evils. We always choose the lesser evil at a particular point in time, depending on how we feel. So how do we identify people of integrity to lead in the midst of what we are seeing now in this report? Doc.
That's a really tough one. That's a really tough one because it is also who presents themselves to be elected, right? In fact, I saw a very interesting post this morning on Facebook by one of my Facebook friends, in which she was raising the question of, we keep saying politics is too dirty, so we're not going to get involved. And one of the core arguments she was raising is that, but it is this same process through which we make laws and force them. So if, quote unquote, the clean ones are deciding that they're going to stay out, then
recording in progress.
Are we sort of outsourcing the process to, quote unquote, those we don't perceive as being clean? More and more, though, I think the burden also falls on citizens. One of the things that I have said is that maybe, perhaps, if I strongly believe that if we vote out leaders on a more regular basis, maybe after every 4 years you're out, perhaps it would send that strong signal that we've reached a point in our peace with democracy where we don't want to be taken for granted anymore, that we actually expect our leaders to deliver. Because other than that, I just don't know how else. And it's also interesting because in Afrobarometer, citizens do say that they believe in the efficacy of elections in ensuring that leaders either represent them or hold them accountable. So my thing is, and I don't know how this is going to work, but my thing is maybe if we get into a habit of regularly voting out our leaders, maybe after one term you're gone, we're willing to vote another person in another one term. If we do that maybe 3-4 times, we might get to a point where leadership would wake up, right? Those who present themselves to be elected to public office may start realizing that, well, Ghanaians are starting to develop a different kind of political culture, which is demanding that we are more responsive to their basic needs, that we meet them at their pinch point. Perhaps we would see a change in behavior. But unless they see that, I think, vigorous type of political behavior from citizens, I'm not sure what elections would end up saving us from. But that, for me, is one of the things that I've been tinkering with a lot, which is using elections as a strong tool of accountability. Then hopefully we would begin to get a lot more people willing to do right by citizens going in for public office. I think it also behoves on some of us, and I'm excluding myself because I have said that for me, I only want to do Afrobarometer and I only want to teach. But I think it also behoves on some of us to begin to become a little more engaged in the public space. It always doesn't mean that I should run for public office, but even advocacy groups that are constantly in the public space, raising issues, creating awareness that puts our elected leaders on notice every time, I think can also help change some of these behaviors and put us on a more positive trajectory, because we can't keep going down this path that we are on.
And that also finds space in the funding of political parties. That's aspect of the survey as well. Of strongly 45% of the respondents disagreeing strongly with any form of funding of political parties and their activities in this country. And we saw what happened. I mean, in the recent, not too long ago, the primaries of the MPP, Dr. Ali Duseidu was with me at a point. And before that conference, I spoke to Sami Krab, one of the aspirants for chairmanship. He said he was going to give sobolo and bread to the delegates, and I knew he was going to lose. That was that point I knew this man is not going anywhere. So when he came last but one, I wasn't surprised, because you at that point you can't give sobolo and bread, and when people are giving thousands of cedis, and actually that's what he did. He said he wanted to give refreshment, really, but that's a dangerous path we're seeing, isn't it? Yes, if we don't want them to be funded, then they'll find other ways to fund themselves. Doc, how do we cure this or address this going forward, please?
Have a very beautiful constitutional and legal framework in place in terms of how we fund and finance our political parties, right? At least it has addressed things like they should have audited accounts, they should submit it to the Electoral Commission, things like that, right? So we do have a framework in place that tries to regulate the funding and financing of political parties. Of course, there are no regulations yet in terms of any caps, how much you can give or not give. So on that, there's a question of enforcement right there. The other thing that those who give inducements would have to start also understanding is that if you look at the CDD pre-election surveys from 2016 and 2020, there's a question about what should you do if someone running for office gives you an inducement. And most respondents said, I'll take the money, but I'll still vote the way I want to vote. For me, I say to those who want to keep giving inducements is that given what citizens are saying, I believe that you have to begin to become a little more circumspect in the extent to which you believe that these inducements can really turn a voter around in your favor. I was a little surprised, though, that the round 9 results are showing citizens strongly against the public financing of political parties, because it is something that I will support. If we can find a good way of creating a system where we can provide some kind of public financing of political parties, but also mindful of the fact that they won't take public financing and then try to circumvent the process and find private ways of still cheating the system by taking private money. But I would really, I mean, it's very clear from round 9 that Ghanaians are strongly opposed to that. But it is a system that I would, if we can do it well, I would strongly support. Now, in what form it takes and how that financing works, given the strengths of the different political parties that we have, is something that would have to give a lot more thought to and carefully construct. But if citizens are this opposed to it, and then again, our 2 major political parties, sometimes when they are in power, they support public financing of political parties, and then, they oppose it, but then when they are in opposition, they support it. So that becomes another point of contention in all of this. But if we do not support public financing of political parties, then we need a much stronger enforcement regime of party financing. I mean, I look forward to the day where an electoral commissioner can actually look at a political party and say, I do not either have all your audited accounts, and I cannot even verify the source of funding for your political party. So the candidates that you're submitting for this election, we are not going to put them on the ballot. I mean, I can only imagine the kind of excuse my hell that would create. But I think if we can come up with a stronger enforcement regime, it may help us deal with this issue of money in the financing of our political parties.
At this point, at least with the kind of opulence that we see, if we should consider any financing of political party activities, in what form should we take?
Thank you very much. Before I answer that, it's like when you learn something for an examination and you go and don't see the question, you take the information back. I have something on my chest.
Please, let it out.
You know what? You've been talking about the SP, and then also I have another issue with the National Anti-Corruption Action Plan.
That's right.
So I talked about we re-strategizing to hold government to account, and civil society leading that crusade. I've said that already. But when it also comes to the plan that we're working with, I just want all of us to remember that we actually Parliament approved the NACAP in the year 2014. NACAP is the 10-year plan, the National Anti-Corruption Action Plan being led, its implementation is being led by SHRAJ. It's a 10-year plan. Today I calculated, we are 8 years down the line.
Yes.
And we are where we are. What does it mean? So we are counting number of workshops, number of seminars, number of this, and they are not contributing anyway to the fight against corruption. If you put in money there, we should actually be charging somebody for
absolutely
what? For what? This allowance is charge. How do you put that one? Okay. Then you talk about the SP's office. And for me, if we are losing so much through corruption, and then with the billions that we are losing from the SHRAJ report, did they say 5 billion? I've forgotten the figure they quoted. We need money to properly set up this office. Bible even says you put your resources where your heart is. Why don't we push in money to set up the SP's office properly? They have a giant building. You were actually trying to lead me to go into a conversation of what have they contributed to. They have a building, if you care to know. They are now trying to partition the place, but they need money to complete the systems and the infrastructure that they need to work with. So then if governments want to show a little bit commitment, in the past, we used to advocate for SHRAJ.
Yes.
And at some point, they started giving SHRAJ plenty money. They started even building new office for them after the fire.
So the same should be extended to the Special Prosecutor's Office.
And if you put money there, with the commitments I've seen the current leadership showing, we would be able to get some results. And I'm sure 2 years from now, Afrobarometer's results finally realize that corruption is going down. I'm advocating for the office. Sammy, when you go back, tell your boss I did that. But for the NACAP, we have to sit up and look at it again. When it comes to political party financing, I have been part of the conversation. I wouldn't say totally I disagree, but before we actually contribute in any form, we should actually ask them to mobilize also for us the kind of resources that they're able to spend. Where they get the money from, we don't know. And then we will know what kind of contribution can be given to the political parties. We can actually also start with giving them support, not in terms of resources, but then places to hold their conferences free of charge and all those things. And then later on, we can actually move gradually, because you have many of them in the system who qualifies, who does not qualify. And some of us who also want to help the country might be even forming political parties in the near future.
I see.
I'm not giving any signal.
No, but you just did.
Oh, okay, take it as such. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Please, round of applause as we go to the Q&A. Dr. Ali Doseido is a senior lecturer at the University of Ghana Political Science Department. Doc has the microphone. And then also would have Dr. Mohammed of the NCC also give a quick remark. Mr. Ben Ayepi in Africa, please get ready as well. Dr. Ali Doseido, please.
Thank you so much for to Afrobarometer CDD for this very wonderful research. I think it's very important that the people who are elected to govern understand what the people feel about the way they govern. And I think the Afrobarometer survey is one of the most important, credible ways of letting the people who are elected to govern know how we feel about the way we govern. And I think most of the things that we've looked at, the level of democratic development in the country, the issue about corruption, the issue about trust in state institutions, and all those things, we haven't seen so much improvement over the years, notwithstanding the fact that there have been a lot of demand for accountability from civil society organizations, the general population, members of academia, and all those things. But I still think this is very important, and I agree very much with Linda when she said that we need to reassess the kind of strategy and approach that we have been using over the years. And when we are able to reassess them, reevaluate them, then we can move to a top notch. I think the naming and shaming is very crucial, so that we are able to bring people on the spot and let them know that we are not happy with what you are doing, and you need to up your game. Other than that, what may happen will not be desirable. So I think it's very important, and we are all very proud and applaud CDD and Afrobarometer for giving us quality data to work with in the academia, quality data to work with our civil society organizations, quality data to work with as media, and a launch pad for us to actually fight corruption with the vigor that it deserves. Thank you so much for...
Thank you very much. Thank you so much. Mr. Benaya, please.
Thank you very much, and congratulations to Afrobarometer and CDD for such a wonderful work. For me, from the Parliament perspective and the results that have been shared, it looks like Parliament still lives in the era where we feel, or citizens feel, that Parliament operates in that opaque system, and Parliament perhaps works in that black box, and so we kind of still don't understand what Parliament does. And I always say that when citizens or when people feel that, or when you don't share information about whatever you are doing to the public, to the people, there's always that chance for them to give interpretations to what you do, and the perceptions and all of that just run out of that. But from the results that have been shared, I'm also very interested in the outcome that Dr. Osei Kwapon also referred to in relation to why a lot of citizens do not really support the public finance of political parties. And then I'm tempted to perhaps think that if I am an ordinary citizen and perhaps you ask me whether I would support government doling out cash to political parties to support their campaign, I may totally reject that. So for me, it may be how they understand the concept and how it even reduces corruption for them to even accept or not accept. So, I think this is a very good work, and once again, congratulations.
Thank you so much. And Zamid Alcon, private legal practitioner with the Office of the Special Prosecutor, he's here. Okay. Then we'll take the final one from Odifo. Yes. I'm sorry. Dr. Mohammed, please. We'll come to you after. So forgive me. So, he's observing. Oh, but the microphone is with him, right? Oh, you can say a few things. Don't worry. It's fine. No. Thank you very much.
I'm not speaking for the SP, so I don't want tomorrow headlines say the SP. But I have my own theory on this whole fight against corruption. Just give me 1 second. And this theory, I've had it long before my association with the SP. I'll say it in paragraphs because I've already shared it with a few colleagues. So I have never considered prosecution as a priority counter-corruption strategy. It is important, but being a defense attorney, the loopholes and how lawyers are able to drag prosecution. And if you check prosecution being done by this government since they've been in power, you realize that it's dragging and still dragging. You've not had people readily and easily convicted to serve as deterrent. I don't also believe in moralism either. I think that different strategies might work for different types of corruption at different departments and agencies. One strategy is strong internal accountability. That includes holding supervisors, managers, CEOs responsible for what happens under them. So if the police is constantly topping perception of corruption survey, we must hold the leader accountable because the leader is expected to put in place integrity programs and counter-corruption programs to ensure that it doesn't happen. Then the second is a strong denouncement of corruption by the political class. Here I'm referring to the executive and the legislature, as well as the judiciary. So that strong denouncement should not just be in words, but in deeds, such as when it happens, how we respond quickly to it, the actions that we take, and how we also support anti-corruption institutions in terms of resourcing them, paying them well, and protecting them also from influence. Then I also believe in collaboration between the law enforcement agencies, which I think for a long time does not exist in reality. So police, IOCO, say now there's Office of the Special Prosecutor, say Auditor General, all of them, I feel that they must work together, right? I sometimes smile when people are always mentioning Auditor General's report because I'm wondering, are we aware that that report is always subjected to scrutiny by the Public Accounts Committee? And the Public Account Committee has the power to refer any case where they think there is corruption or, say, any other offense to the appropriate agency. So, for instance, if you read the OSP Act, they can refer a matter which they think borders on corruption after reviewing the Auditor General's report to the OSP. How do they do that? And when they have held their meeting looking into the audited report, what does the Auditor General also do after that? Do we go back? Because then people will come and say, you didn't assess it right, you didn't do this. I'm just saying that sometimes we bundle it as if that's the end of it all. But there are processes that should be able to check it. Then lastly, I think that we need commitment from the judiciary to support the work of law enforcement agencies. So that, and also training for our judiciary in anti-corruption modules, for them to understand how those institutions operate and what help they can give to it. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Thank you very much. Lawyer Samedakon. Dr. Mohammed, NCC, Dr. Zia.
Thank you very much for the opportunity. When at first you skipped my name, it's a signal that I should be brief, so I'll make it very brief. And in fact, since I have been given the opportunity at my commission to serve as the director for programs, I begin to get more curious about Ghana's performance within global standards. And first of all, I think this revelation by Afrobarometer, with what I've also seen with the Global Democracy Index that is always being issued by the Economic Intelligence Unit in terms of Ghana's performance, I see some sort of consistency, which means that if you compare ourselves, the consistency is not in the positive sense anyway. In terms of the figures, I think, what do you call it? We talk about 51% in terms of the Afrobarometer saying that people believe that Ghana is a full democracy with, minor problems. If you compare with the Global Democracy Index, it's almost the same thing, except that the index has a different classification. If you score 6 points, you score below 7, you are a flawed democracy. And I have looked at the figures for a number of years, and I've seen that it's been, consistent with what Afrobarometer has also revealed. Then coming back to my work as a civic educator, I think the data and the information that have been churned out here today by Dr. Salome and then our able discussants, it points to me the amount of work that we have to do as civic educators. Because consistently, when we look at liberal democracy, the central focus of it is civic participation. How do you get citizens to participate? Participation on two fronts. We can queue on election day and then cast our ballot. But more substantively, after elections, to what extent do we, hold leaders accountable? To what extent do we, use the core system? The constraints are there, but for us as civic education, I think in collaboration with civil society, Mrs. Linda Oforikwa pointed to that, the role civil society and state institutions like us should be able to play to open up the space for citizens to come out and participate. Unfortunately, in Ghana today, we have largely urban population with appreciable levels of education. And I think it is time that that population occupies the space, right? If you look at people who earn less than $1, the major concern is about what to eat. But if you are able to rise beyond certain threshold, you should look beyond solving your personal problem to going into community and civic engagement to help in, holding leaders accountable and then participating into the political front. Thank you very much for that.
Thank you very much. Or therefore, Amwakwa Bwedu the third. Nana, thank you.
Thank you very much, and thank you for inviting the National House of Chiefs to be part of this. Therefore, Amwakwa
Bwedu the third.
Omahini from Breman Isikuma. I'm the president of Central Regional House of Chiefs.
Thank you very much.
And today I'm representing the National House of Chiefs. First, let me thank Afrobarometer and CDD for the wonderful work that they are doing, for letting us know what is happening, even among us. And I am very happy that among the most trusted institutions, we have the Chieftaincy institution. So I'll urge my colleague chiefs to keep up the good work. But then, I don't know if we say we want to identify the policemen who are corrupt. I don't know the number that we are going to get. And if we should also bring all those who give money to the policemen to one place, we are going to have a lot of people. That means a lot of people are all involved in this corruption. Somebody received and somebody gave. We are living in a system or a country where if someone leaves money in a taxi and the taxi driver goes to give the money to the owner, it is exceptional. It is no longer
This
normal.
is big
That
news.
means corruption is endemic. It is part of the system. It is like normal because what the taxi driver did was normal. But because we have accepted taking the money as normal, we contributed money even more than what
He returned.
he returned.
Yeah.
What can we do? I think it is mindset. We have to change our mindset about corruption. CDD, we are talking about democracy, but then we existed as a people long before democracy came. We had chiefs in control of communities. They had executive powers, judicial powers, legislative powers, but all have been taken from them. Even with the judicial, we only have chieftaincy issues being handled by traditional councils, regional houses of chiefs, and national house of chiefs. We saw what Asantehene did. When he came within the first 5 years, he resolved about 400 cases that should have been in the courts. So we have chiefs who are trusted, who have maintained the system, but then we have inherited democracy, which is good, which is helping us, but we have thrown away the very good things that we had. We have taken all powers from chiefs. We need to revisit ourselves. We need to identify ourselves as Ghanaians. Where are we coming from? Where is our sense of belonging? Where is that community spirit? Where if you have money, you are thinking of how to help your brother, not how much to get more, to be greedy, to amass wealth, to take bribe. We can start by first giving power to chiefs. And I will say that that law that was taken away from chiefs, to the extent that if a chief invites you to the palace and you don't go, you are free, that should be brought back. We should have that sense of identity as a people to change our mindset. Corruption should not be norm. No. We should have that identity as a community, that community spirit, to have that mindset change. And we can do this by community in community. And chiefs can be used to do this. So I thank you for bringing us. We've seen here that chiefs are among the most trusted. Let's take advantage. Let's take advantage of this potential opportunity, which item latent, which we are not using. We've embraced everything from the foreigners and we've thrown our own away. Let us please think again, change our mindset, and embrace our own. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Nana. We'll take 3 questions and then we'll round it up. So if you put up your hand, Please go straight to the point and then, yes, we're done.
Okay, thank you very much. My name is Adam. I work with Star FM. So we've seen the data presented, very, very informative. Fortunately for me, last week I was at the Shrach event also, so I'm able to juxtapose the figures. My first question has to do with this. We are dealing with perception here. For example, with the police, we are looking at a figure of about 67% plus in terms of people who think they are corrupt. The actualities from last week gave us about 57%. Is it the case that's my first question, is it the case that as a people in Ghana, we tend to have wrong perception? Is it that the perception is, for example, the office of the president, because we are hearing allegations in the media and in spaces that this person has done A and B, is that what is informing us to think that way, which could indirectly be influencing people to act that way because that's what you think I am, so let me go ahead and then do it? That could be wrong. But is the perception overly, is it overly overstated? Is it overstated, thereby causing us to think indeed we are too corrupt? Okay. That is my first question. Second question goes to Dr. Kwapong. Yeah, Dr. Kwapong, where he speaks about, if possible, let's change people every 4 years. Are we not likely to create a cycle where leaders feel that I have just 4 years to loot, I have just 4 years to get everything I have, because after the 4 years, it's possible I will not come back again? Is that not actually a dangerous solution to the problem we are facing? Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Any more? If not, please, let's get the answers. Dr. Kwapong, first to you, and then we'll get the roundup.
Yes, so I'll take the second question first. You're correct. It could also provide the opposite incentive. So I think, as I've been thinking about it, I've been thinking about it more optimistically in terms of it would provide the right set of incentive that would force a change in behavior. A couple of years ago, Professor Kwesi Prempeh had this model in terms of how it contributes to either a high or a low incidence of corruption, where he pointed to 3 key components: the opportunity for corruption, the cost of corruption, as well as the punishment for corruption, right? So if the opportunities are many, the cost for engaging in corrupt behavior is low and punishment is also low, then you might see an incident, a high rate of incidence of corruption. So if we think of that, in terms of, an election, that if we are able to send the signal that through our votes, we are lowering the opportunities for corruption, we are making it a high cost in terms of electoral outcomes, and also making it a high punishment proposition in terms of we'll vote you out of power. That is how I was thinking about it. But then again, people are likely to say academics are all theoretical and not practical. But that's the mindset in which I was thinking perhaps that could force a change of behavior. In terms of the perceptions of corruption and whether it is overly exaggerated, in fact, you can validate that within Afrobarometer by looking at there's a section where there are questions about, did you have contact with a public school, with the police trying to get assistance, etc., etc. And then if you did you pay, a bribe to get any of those assistance, medical care, police assistance, etc. And when you place it side by side with our perceptions of corruption, you actually see that they are not poles apart.
Right. Okay, so then to add on to what Don just said, you realize that we're talking about the actual. So then they ask you a question whether you pick the bribe, the last, if we come to this room. Whether we paid bribes last week, last 2 weeks. Would you answer the question? So it's possible not everybody answered that question. And secondly, as you rightly said, when you do perception surveys, we have experiences, the contacts. So we have questions that go beyond the perception. We've done perception surveys also at GI and the rest. So then we actually ask the question, the relationship, the contact, who are you dealing with? And I remember one of the times it was not the police service. Police service was perceived to be the most corrupt, but I remember the customs division of GRE was also perceived to be the one that takes more money. So then police money was more money, but they were taking big money. So these kind of things might have contributed one way or the other to the differences. But 53% is not anything to write home about and be happy with. If they had asked me whether I've paid the bribe before, they should have actually surveyed me. I'm sure my own contribution would have actually taken us to 70. That's
but does the quantum matter? In this whole conversation about...
Okay, so then we have petty corruption that affects majority of people, and it's quite worrying because you have to deal with the police, you have to go and report they've stolen my car, and every now and then you're taking money from me. And secondly, also, they take the money by the roadside. Others take the big monies, not by the roadside. So we don't see those ones. The quantum does happen when you're looking at measuring the grand corruption, big corruption, and its impacts. But this one affects more people. So day to day dealing with, I think the Shraj report, I saw very high figures when it got to people dealing with the health sector and people dealing with the hospitals. And that's very worrying. Indeed. To be frank, it's even more worrying than any other thing. Look at the people that take their young ones to the hospital. Most of the time, it's even women. So women suffer. Women are not corrupt. They don't get opportunities to steal more. Men steal. They don't go to the hospital. Women go, they pay more. So then we have to look at all these things. And for me, when I saw that figure, I went like, wow. It was quite worrying for me. So if you have to pay school fees, you have all those things, education stuff and all those things. And the people that really do those payments are women, and we should be concerned about corruption and its impact on gender as well.
Dr. Sante, finally, and then Professor H. Pepe as well. Well, Prof, you are done. Okay, Dr. Sante, please.
Very much. No, I was not going to speak, but I think Linda's last contribution. I think we all have to remind ourselves that, you know, the story, if you've been tracking the data for a while, we are really in a very bad place. Particularly when you look at the pervasiveness of corruption. It's becoming a way of life. People are becoming more accepting of it. Now, there are a lot of dangers there. These days, we talk about terrorism in other countries and we forget. But can you imagine if the police are corrupt, if, you know, hospitals are corrupt, if hotels are corrupt? Because corruption also in the private sector, and, you know, it's a very serious problem. Can you imagine how easy it is for terrorists to embed themselves in this place and operate? You know, it's going to be very hard for your national security and all the security infrastructure to sort of have the kind of intelligence of how people, because all you have to do is give somebody a little money and that's it. So we are playing with fire. I always start any conversation about corruption that is an existential threat. And over the years, it's becoming worse and worse. And what really worries me is a certain sense of acceptance. And our political leaders also feeling that, well, it's a way of life. So we just go along with it. That is a very dangerous situation, and at some point we will begin to feel the effects. I mean, everything we are experiencing with public services, the quality of public services, even policy incoherence, the fact that you can pour as much money as you can from taxpayers' money. And remember, this year the target was 80 billion Ghana cedis. If we mobilize all the tax resources, 80 billion plus the Euro bonds and all of that stuff, we put it in all the infrastructure that we put in it, and you begin to count the cost of corruption and its impact on people's lives and the quality of life. You know, you begin to really realize how very bad. And the fact that we don't seem to have any handle on it, and we cannot even add more. How is that possible? So I think for me, I want everybody to just remember that we are almost like sleepwalking into an abyss. And the earlier we wake up and do something about it, the better. And there are very easy ways to deal with these things. We just need the political leaders.
Appreciate it as well. Thank you so much, Mrs. Linda Ofoekwafo. Thank you. And we appreciate your company. And for us as media, even though the survey says that there's a freedom to publish and there's no restrictions, it is what happens after you have published your story that matters to us. There's the freedom to do. We will not restrict you. It is the aftermath. So yes, maybe at the point you can also take that into consideration. But thank you so much for this platform as well. It's been productive. We'll see how the days ahead will look like. Appreciate it. Thank you so much. Ladies and gentlemen, so please, we are done, but please let the conversation continue, and the interviews as well that we would have with other people who are here.